There is a woman standing on the deck of a sinking ship. The year is 1916. The ship beneath her is the largest hospital ship in the world, and it is disappearing into the sea. Around her, people are screaming, lifeboats are being lowered. The ship's enormous propellers are still turning beneath the water, and the current is pulling her directly towards them. She has only seconds to decide: remain in the lifeboat and be torn apart by the propellers, or jump into the sea and risk drowning beneath the sinking ship. She jumps. The force of the water pulls her under. She strikes her head. Her skull fractures and everything becomes dark, but somehow she survives. This should have been the most terrifying moment of her life, but it was not. Because 4 years earlier, this same woman had stood aboard another sinking ship, a ship the world had been told was practically unsinkable, a ship called Titanic. And 1 year before Titanic, she had survived a violent collision aboard Titanic's sister ship, Olympic, 3 sister ships, 3 maritime disasters, 1 woman aboard all of them, and somehow she lived through every one. Her name was Violet Jessup. Some called her the Queen of Sinking Ships, others called her Miss Unsinkable. But was Violet Jessup the luckiest woman in history, or was she the unluckiest? Welcome to Bio Mystery Media. Today, you will learn English through the extraordinary true story of Violet Jessup, the woman who survived the Titanic and 2 more ship disasters. Stay until the end, because the final mystery of Violet's life came years after she retired, when she received a telephone call from someone who claimed to be a child she had rescued from the Titanic. Violet Constance Jessup was born on October 2, 1887. Her birthplace was near Bahia Blanca, Argentina. Her parents, William and Catherine Jessup, were Irish Catholic immigrants who had moved to South America and become sheep farmers. Violet grew up on the open plains of Argentina, but her childhood was not peaceful. It was shaped by illness, hardship, responsibility, and death. As a child, Violet suffered from typhoid and tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a serious infectious disease that usually attacks the lungs, was one of the most feared illnesses of the 19th century. Before modern antibiotics existed, many people who developed tuberculosis did not survive. Violet became so seriously ill that doctors reportedly gave her little hope of recovery, but Violet refused to die. Her body fought the disease, slowly, against the expectations of those around her. She recovered. This was the first time Violet Jessup survived something that should have killed her. It would not be the last. Key vocabulary: resilience. Resilience means the ability to recover from illness, difficulty, or disaster. Violet developed resilience before she ever saw an ocean liner. Her childhood taught her that life could change without warning, and that survival sometimes depended on the decision to continue, even when continuing seemed impossible. In 1903, when Violet was 16, her father died. His death placed the family in a dangerous financial position. Violet's mother, Catherine, moved the family to England. There, Catherine found employment as a stewardess aboard ships belonging to the Royal Mail Line. A stewardess was a female employee who cared for passengers aboard a ship. She prepared cabins, changed beds, cleaned rooms, served food, answered passengers' requests, and worked extremely long hours. Catherine's income supported the family, but after several years at sea, she became ill. Violet was now 21. She had younger brothers and sisters who depended on her. She could no longer remain in school. She needed employment, immediately. And so Violet made the decision that would define the rest of her life. She followed her mother to sea. In 1908, Violet applied for work as a ship stewardess, but she encountered an unusual problem. Shipping companies believed that she looked too young, and perhaps too attractive, At that time, many companies preferred stewardesses who appeared older, serious, and unlikely to attract attention from male passengers or crew members. Violet needed the job, so she reportedly changed her appearance. She wore plain clothing. She avoided cosmetics. She arranged her hair simply. She tried to make herself appear older than she was. The strategy worked. Violet secured a position aboard the RMS Orinoco, a Royal Mail Line ship traveling between Britain and the Caribbean. Life aboard an ocean liner looked glamorous to wealthy passengers. There were elegant dining rooms, expensive furniture, beautiful clothing, music, fine food, and long evenings of entertainment. But below that luxury was an army of workers. The crew cleaned, cooked, carried luggage, maintained engines, served meals, and responded to passengers at every hour. For Violet, a normal working day could last 17 hours. 17 hours, cleaning cabins, carrying heavy objects, serving wealthy travelers, and maintaining a polite expression, even when passengers treated her as invisible. Key vocabulary: demanding. Demanding means requiring a great amount of effort, attention, patience, or skill. Violet's work was physically and emotionally demanding, but she needed the income. She also possessed qualities that made her valuable aboard international ships. She was calm, she was disciplined, and she spoke English, Spanish, and French. In 1910, Violet joined the White Star Line. This company was preparing to introduce three of the most impressive ocean liners ever constructed. Their names were Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. The company intended these ships to dominate travel across the Atlantic. They would be larger than their competitors, more luxurious, more comfortable, and people believed safer. The first of the three ships was RMS Olympic. In 1911, Violet joined its crew. She could not have known that she had just stepped into one of the strangest stories in maritime history. When Olympic entered service, it was the largest passenger ship in the world. The vessel was more than 269 meters long. Its grand public rooms were designed to resemble an expensive hotel. Passengers could enjoy electric lifts, elegant restaurants, comfortable cabins, reading rooms, and a famous grand staircase. But on September 20, 1911, only a few months after Olympic began carrying passengers, something went terribly wrong. Olympic was sailing near the Isle of Wight, off the southern coast of England. Nearby was a Royal Navy cruiser called HMS Hawke. The two vessels moved dangerously close together. Then, the Hawke struck Olympic's side. The collision tore large holes into Olympic's hull. Water entered the ship. Sections of the vessel were badly damaged. Parts of its propeller system were affected. Key vocabulary: collision. A collision happens when two moving objects strike each other with force. This was not a small accident. The impact was powerful enough to seriously damage both ships. Violet was aboard Olympic when the collision happened. She felt the impact, she saw the confusion, and she understood that the enormous ship beneath her was not invulnerable. Invulnerable means impossible to damage, injure, or defeat. The Olympic had been created as a symbol of modern engineering, but one collision had torn open its steel body. Fortunately, the ship did not sink. Olympic returned to port and was repaired. There were no deaths aboard Olympic from the collision. For Violet, the experience was frightening, but she did not leave her profession. 7 months later, White Star Line prepared to launch Olympic's younger sister, a ship even more famous, even more luxurious, and soon, far more tragic. Its name was Titanic. RMS Titanic was one of the largest and most luxurious ships in the world. It was built in Belfast and designed to carry passengers across the Atlantic Ocean. The ship contained 16 major watertight compartments. Watertight means designed to prevent water from passing through. These compartments were intended to limit flooding if part of the ship was damaged. Because of these safety features, Titanic was widely described as practically unsinkable. But the word unsinkable created an illusion. An illusion is a false belief or appearance that does not match reality. Titanic was a remarkable ship, but it was not indestructible. When Violet was offered a position aboard Titanic, she was reluctant to accept it. She had grown comfortable aboard Olympic. Olympic was familiar. Titanic was new and uncertain. A friend persuaded her to take the opportunity. So on April 10, 1912, Violet boarded Titanic as one of its stewardesses. The ship departed from Southampton, England, on its maiden voyage to New York. Key phrase, maiden voyage. A maiden voyage is the first official journey made by a new ship. Titanic stopped at Cherbourg in France and Queenstown, now called Cobb, in Ireland. Then it entered the open Atlantic. More than 2,200 people were aboard. There were millionaires traveling in first class, middle-class families in second class, immigrants traveling in third class, and hundreds of crew members who worked throughout the ship. For 4 days, the journey appeared successful. Passengers explored the vessel. They ate elaborate meals. They listened to music. They wrote letters. They discussed their arrival in America. Few understood that they were living through the final days of Titanic, and for many of them, the final days of their lives. On April 14, 1912, Titanic sailed deeper into the North Atlantic. Throughout the day, other ships transmitted warnings about ice. The temperature fell, night arrived, and the ocean became dangerously calm. This calmness created a serious problem. When waves strike the base of an iceberg, they produce white water. That white water can help sailors see ice in the darkness. But on this night there were almost no waves. The sea was flat. The sky was dark. The iceberg ahead was difficult to identify. At approximately 11:40 p.m., the ship's lookout saw something directly in Titanic's path. They rang the warning bell. The bridge attempted to turn the ship, but it was too late. Titanic struck the iceberg. The impact was not necessarily the violent explosion many people imagine. Violet later remembered hearing a low tearing and grinding sound. The iceberg scraped along the ship's side. Below the waterline, the damage allowed the sea to enter several compartments. At first, many passengers did not understand what had happened. Some remained in their beds. Others came into the corridors and asked questions. The ship's lights were still working. The floors still appeared stable. The music had not yet stopped. Titanic looked safe. But deep inside the vessel, water was rising. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, examined the damage. He understood the mathematics. Too many compartments were flooding. The weight of the water would pull the bow lower. Water would then flow into the next compartment, and then the next. Titanic was going to sink. Violet had finished her prayers and was in her cabin when she heard the unusual sound. Initially, she believed it might be part of a safety drill, but she was soon ordered to dress, put on a life jacket, and go to the boat deck. Some passengers could not speak English. They did not understand the crew's instructions. Violet and the other stewardesses were told to stand where passengers could see them wearing life jackets. Their behavior would demonstrate what people were expected to do. Key vocabulary: demonstrate. Demonstrate means to show someone how something should be done. Violet was not simply trying to save herself. She was helping frightened passengers understand the emergency. The order was given to place women and children into the lifeboats, but many people hesitated. The lifeboats looked small. The ocean below looked cold and dangerous, and Titanic still appeared safer than the little boats hanging above the water. Some of the early lifeboats left without carrying all the people they could hold. Minutes passed. The bow sank lower. The angle of the deck changed, and the reality became impossible to ignore. Titanic was dying. Eventually, Violet was ordered into Lifeboat 16. As the boat was being prepared, an officer reportedly placed a baby into her arms. Violet held the child close. The lifeboat moved down the side of Titanic and reached the freezing ocean. From the water, the people in the boats watched the ship. They could see its lights. They could hear its machinery. They could hear cries from the people who remained aboard. Then Titanic's lights disappeared. The ship broke apart, and the great vessel sank beneath the Atlantic. More than 1,500 passengers and crew members died. The water was so cold that many people who entered it became unable to move within minutes. Violet remained in Lifeboat 16, holding the baby she had been given. She could do nothing but wait in the darkness. Hours later, the rescue ship Carpathia arrived. Its crew brought the survivors aboard and gave them blankets, warm drinks, and medical assistance. Violet climbed onto Carpathia while still carrying the child. According to Violet's account, a woman suddenly approached her. The woman took the baby from Violet's arms. Then she disappeared into the crowd without explaining who she was or thanking Violet. Violet assumed that the woman was the child's mother, but the baby's precise identity was never confirmed. This small detail became one of the mysteries of Violet Jessup's story. Who was the child? Who was the woman? And what happened to them after they reached New York? Records have produced possible explanations, but there is no universally accepted answer. The baby remains part of Titanic's many unresolved stories. Key vocabulary: unresolved. Unresolved means not explained, decided, or brought to a final conclusion. The Titanic disaster was over, but Violet's connection to the unknown child was not. Decades later, the mystery would return through a telephone call. For now, Violet had survived. She returned to England. She had witnessed one of the worst maritime disasters in modern history, but once again, she did not abandon the sea. In 1914, the First World War began. Europe descended into conflict. Millions of soldiers were sent into battle. Ships that had been created for peaceful travel were taken for military service. The third Olympic-class sister ship was Britannic. Originally, Britannic was intended to become another luxury passenger liner, but the war changed its purpose. Before it could begin regular passenger service, the British government converted it into a hospital ship. Its hull was painted white. Large red crosses were placed along its sides. A green stripe extended across the vessel. Inside, luxurious rooms were transformed into medical wards. A medical ward. A medical ward is an area of a hospital where patients receive treatment. Britannic's mission was to collect wounded soldiers and transport them away from the battlefields. Violet volunteered to serve as a nurse. She worked in hospitals on land before receiving an assignment aboard Britannic. Consider that decision. Violet had already survived a collision aboard Olympic. She had already survived Titanic. She understood what could happen at sea, but she returned. Why? The answer was not simply courage. Violet needed employment. Life at sea was the profession she understood, and during the war her skills could help wounded soldiers. On November 21, 1916, Britannic was traveling through the Aegean Sea near the Greek island of Kea. Early that morning, Violet attended Mass afterwards. She prepared to eat breakfast. Then, at approximately 8:12 a.m., an explosion shook the ship. Britannic had struck a German mine. The explosion damaged Britannic's starboard side. Water rushed into the ship. The vessel began to list. To list means for a ship to lean heavily towards one side. The crew attempted to close the watertight doors, but some portholes had been opened to provide fresh air inside the medical wards. As the ship leaned, seawater entered through those openings. Britannic began flooding faster than expected. The captain attempted to move the ship towards shallow water. If he could place it on the seabed before it completely sank, perhaps the vessel could be saved. But keeping the engines running meant that the propellers continued to turn. Meanwhile, fear spread across the decks. Some people entered lifeboats before the official order to abandon ship had been given. Several boats were lowered into the water while Britannic was still moving. This decision was catastrophic. Catastrophic means causing sudden, enormous damage or suffering. The motion of the ship created a powerful current. That current pulled the lifeboats towards Britannic's enormous propellers. The people inside the boats saw the blades approaching. Some tried to row away, others jumped into the sea. But the current was too strong. The propellers struck the lifeboats. Wood shattered. People were thrown into the water, and the sea around the ship became a place of terror. Violet was in one of the endangered boats. She understood what was about to happen. There was no safe choice. If she remained in the boat, she could be pulled into the propellers. If she jumped, she might be dragged beneath the ship. Violet jumped. The cold water closed above her. The movement of Britannic pulled her downward. She struck her head against something hard. Her skull fractured. Her leg was badly injured. For a moment, she believed she would never return to the surface. Then she found a way out of the current. She reached the air, and rescuers pulled her from the water. Britannic sank in approximately 55 minutes. 30 people died. More than 1,000 survived. Violet watched the third Olympic-class sister disappear. This time, the sinking had nearly taken her with it. Among the possessions Violet carried from Britannic was an ordinary toothbrush. It sounds like a strange object to remember during a disaster. But the toothbrush had a history. After Titanic sank, Violet had complained about being unable to clean her teeth. Her friends later joked that she should never enter another disaster without first bringing her toothbrush. When Britannic struck the mine, Violet remembered that lesson. She returned to her cabin and collected it. The toothbrush did not save her life, but it represented something unusual about Violet's character. She could remember an inconvenience from one catastrophe and prepare for it during the next. Key vocabulary: practical. Practical means concerned with useful actions and real situations rather than abstract ideas. Even during a life-threatening emergency, Violet remained practical. She gathered what she believed she would need. Then she faced the danger in front of her. Violet suffered a serious skull fracture and a deep injury to her leg. Her recovery took time. The First World War eventually ended. Passenger ships returned to regular travel. And in 1920, Violet made an extraordinary decision. She returned to Olympic, the same sister ship on which her strange journey had begun. Another person might have refused to walk near a harbor again. Violet returned to work aboard the surviving member of the Olympic class. She later served with the Red Star Line and the Royal Mail Line. She traveled around the world. She continued working at sea until her retirement in 1950. Why did she return? Violet reportedly explained that she possessed a powerful will to live and deep religious faith. But there was also a simpler reason. She needed to work, and the sea was the life she knew. Key vocabulary: livelihood. A livelihood is the work or source of income that allows a person to support herself and meet her needs. For Violet, the ocean was not simply an adventure, it was her livelihood. It had nearly killed her, but it had also provided her family with food, income, purpose, and opportunity. That contradiction defined her life. She feared what the sea could do, but she also understood that it was part of who she had become. After retiring, Violet moved to a cottage in Great Ashfield, Suffolk. She lived quietly. She cared for her garden. She raised chickens. And she rarely sought public attention for her experiences. Then, according to the story Violet later told, something strange happened. One stormy evening, many years after Titanic sank, her telephone rang. A woman was on the line. The caller asked Violet a question. Had she saved a baby on the night Titanic sank? Violet answered yes. The woman then claimed that she had been that baby. She laughed and disconnected the call. Violet's friend and memoir editor, John Maxstone Graham, believed the call might have been a joke played by local children. But Violet reportedly insisted that she had never told anyone in the village about carrying the baby. Was the caller truly the child from Lifeboat 16? Was it a practical joke? Had someone discovered the story from another source? Or had Violet's memory changed during the many decades since the disaster? There is no final answer. The caller was never identified. The mystery remains unresolved, and perhaps that is appropriate. Violet's life had always existed between reality and impossibility. The facts alone sound like fiction. One unexplained telephone call simply added another mystery. Was Violet Jessup lucky? She survived tuberculosis. She survived Olympics collision. She survived Titanic. She survived Britannic. She survived freezing water, a fractured skull, and a violent current pulling her towards moving propellers. But calling her lucky tells only half the story, because luck placed Violet aboard 3 disasters. Resilience helped her survive them. She remained calm. She followed instructions. She helped passengers who could not understand English. She cared for a baby during the Titanic disaster. She recognized the danger of Britannic's propellers, and she acted when hesitation could have killed her. Courage does not mean living without fear. Courage means taking action while fear is present. Violet Jessup was not unsinkable because disaster could not reach her. Disaster reached her repeatedly. She was unsinkable because every time life pushed her beneath the surface, she found a way to rise again. Here are 5 important words from today's story. Resilience, the ability to recover from illness, difficulty, or disaster. Violet's resilience helped her continue after 3 maritime accidents. Collision, an accident in which 2 moving objects strike each other. Olympic was badly damaged in a collision with HMS Hawke. Maiden voyage, the first official journey made by a ship. Titanic sank during its maiden voyage. Catastrophic, causing sudden and enormous damage or suffering. Lowering the lifeboats near Britannic's propellers had catastrophic consequences. Livelihood, the work or income that allows someone to support herself. Working at sea was Violet's livelihood. One final phrase. To abandon ship means to leave a ship because it is in immediate danger. The crew received the order to abandon ship as Britannic continued sinking. Violet Jessup died in England on May 5, 1971. She was 83 years old. Her memoirs were published after her death, allowing the world to understand the woman behind the legend. Not simply Miss Unsinkable, not simply a lucky survivor, but a working woman who experienced some of the most important maritime disasters in history and still found the courage to return to the sea. If Violet's story surprised you, leave a comment below. Tell us what you think. Was Violet Jessup the luckiest woman in history? Or the unluckiest? Subscribe to Bio Mystery Media. Every week we reveal the human stories behind history, the mystery beneath the facts, and the English vocabulary that helps you understand the world. Every life hides a story. Every disaster leaves a mystery. We are going to keep telling them.